The METUS Tech Show.
Welcome to the METUS Tech Show, a show for HVAC professionals by HVAC professionals.
The METUS Tech Show.
Mitsubishi.
All right, so when I cook chili, it basically starts off the same way as when I cook spaghetti sauce, or like the Italians call it gravy.
Gravy, yeah.
Right? I use 3 different kinds of meat, right? I'll use some hot sausage. I'll use ground beef or beef or, steak, cubed up, some type of beef. And then I'll find something else like lamb or maybe I'll use ground turkey. I don't know. I like 3 different kinds of meat.
Lamb.
I know,
All right,
right?
Chef Ramsay.
Yeah.
Right,
Lamb.
yeah.
I don't really like lamb, but when it's ground up and mixed with something else that hides the flavor, it's pretty cool.
Oh, lamb's delicious anyways.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about it, but I'll do that. I've done it a couple of times. So I add in all my, the peppers, green and red peppers, garlic, and what I do. So it used to drive me crazy when I was a kid. My mother, to counteract the acid in the tomatoes, she would put sugar, which I can't stand, and a lot of sauces, jarred sauces you buy have high fructose corn syrup, which is horrible. So to counteract that, I take carrots and grind them up really fine, and I throw it in there. So
Yeah, they absorb all
and there's all kinds of spices and everything else. And I know how you feel about this, but I do like beans in my chili.
Beans are not allowed.
No,
in
technically
chili.
it's not allowed, but I like it in there. I'll put cannellini beans or the Great White Northern beans, whatever they're called, kidney beans, pinto beans, black beans.
The word bean should not be in chili.
It's really good. But I was telling you the other day, I make this homemade pepper relish.
Yeah.
Every September, late August, September, me and a bunch of neighbors, well, they used to be neighbors, we were kids, but now they're all over the place. But we'll get these peppers. I forget what they're called, but I want to say they got like a 15,000 to 20,000 Scoville rating. We just grind them up. We put them in 5-gallon buckets after they're ground up with a cup of salt, stir it all night long, and then we can it just like you would can anything else. It lasts on the shelf forever. And I'll take probably half a quart of that pepper and put it in my chili.
Yeah.
My chili is flavorful and it's spicy.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I like chili, but it's not like a thing that I do or make or anything into that
That's
regard.
because you're from a warm climate.
Is that okay?
Now, this, wintertime in the Northeast,
It's a big thing up here?
It's chili time. I don't just say it's a big thing, but it's a big thing for me.
Oh.
My chili, I like to do the chunky
Yeah.
Now, do
chili
you
with
put
all the
beans
veggies and
You put
everything.
beans in yours too?
I do too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't understand this whole, chili on top of spaghetti thing. That's another whole other
Oh, that's
conversation.
a big Cincinnati thing.
Okay,
They put
they know nothing about chili.
They put cinnamon in their chili.
No, a little dash of cinnamon, you can barely taste it, but
no,
But I have yet to have good chili in Cincinnati. I'm sorry, they just don't know what they're talking about. It shouldn't go on spaghetti. I know we're going to get emails. I'm sorry if you live in Cincinnati, but the people rave about it. It's just horrible.
Yeah.
But my chili basically starts off, I use 85% ground beef. I want the grease in there.
You brown the meat. You don't drain it. You leave that.
I got to drain some of it.
No, you leave it in there. That's flavor.
I mean,
It's a trip to the hospital too.
See,
But anyway.
my chili is Brunswick stew. That's what I make.
Yeah.
In the South for me. But yeah, like I said, it's funny. That's chili's just not a big thing.
But day 2 chili.
I was gonna say day 2 chili is phenomenal.
Day
Like
2
all the flavors change.
I'll cook the chili, and I'll put it in the fridge right away. After it cools off. The next day when I'm going to eat it for dinner, it's in the crock pot all day. All those flavors,
All the
melt
flavors
together, and then after that, you get those nacho chips, the big nacho chips. You bake them for a few minutes in the oven, and you just pour the chili right over it. And now you got some nachos with chili. You can get your cheese on top of that, sour cream if you like it. I'm not a sour cream guy, but
I just don't know about the lamb. I made a leg of lamb one time. It ended up in the trash after I made it.
yeah. Well, the thing about lamb, you got a 50-50 shot of lamb being good. I've had it a bunch of times, and it's literally
How are you cooking these lambs?
half the time.
I went all out and I did it.
Did you get lamb chop like the?
My Italian buddy told me exactly how to do it. You lay down onions and celery on the bottom of a pan, leg of lamb marinated overnight, everything. It to me, it tasted like the most gamiest meat. I didn't like it.
I'll send you over a recipe. You got it.
But anyway, back to the chili.
I know.
So Hamburg, 85%. I throw in some, because I'm from the Northeast and I'm Portuguese, I throw in ground chorizo in there as well.
I'll do that too.
Cook that up. Onions, garlic, green pepper.
Yep.
Love my green pepper, red pepper, sweet peppers. And then I throw in some Rotel, can of Rotel. That's tomatoes and chopped chilies.
Yeah.
And it's medium. I get the medium one. Throw that in there. And I use the tomato sauce as a base.
Yep.
But the tomato sauce I use is just the regular Hunt's in the can. Traditional, plain tomato sauce. You don't want anything in a jar with cheese or anything like that.
No,
you just
you
want
don't.
the traditional base of the sauce.
You have to look at the ingredients if you're going to use canned sauce and make sure there's no other junk in it. Make sure it's just tomatoes. I do that too, but if I don't make my own tomato sauce, which I'll do in the summertime when they're ripe, but I'll use a pureed tomatoes, a big giant can of pureed tomatoes, and some tomato sauce as well. But you got to make sure they don't put junk in it. Some of these people are putting in high fructose corn syrup in it, and it's just awful.
Yeah. So basically, I don't know if you guys have seen in the supermarket, little tiny red peppers.
Yeah.
We call them firecrackers.
Firecrackers. Yeah, I know exactly that. Yeah.
I use those. Japanese, Chinese restaurants, they use them all the time in their dishes. I use sparingly because they're powerful.
Yeah.
I'll throw some of those in there chopped up. All right, you got to be real careful with those. The big thing at the end when you serve it is chopped red onion on top, a dollop of sour cream, and some shredded cheese on top of that.
Shredded cheese.
And man, let me tell you. And don't forget I put kidney beans in my
I'll
chili.
try that. I'll maneuver around the beans, but I want to try your chili.
You don't like beans?
No, I just don't. Anything the word bean, I don't eat.
You know what we need to do? We need to have a chili cook-off.
You know what? If I'm ever in a chili cook-off, you know what my secret weapon is? I'm going to go to Wendy's. I'm going to buy some chili and say, here you go. Try my chili.
Yeah.
That'll probably win.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we always have chili cook-offs at our main headquarters in Swanee, Georgia. I'm always hoping my trips will align with that.
So you can hit it. Yeah.
But where are you going to cook it?
I'll cook it right at the Residence Inn, right on the stove. You know? But anyway, welcome to the METUS Tech Show. We are going to talk about a hot topic today, powerboard failure.
Powerboards.
And not only that, but best practices replacing them.
Yeah.
All right. Now, being an instructor, I've had the opportunity to, and Scott's already laughing because he's an instructor as well. I've had the opportunity of bugging our equipment with a bad power board, and that's caused more problems than anything. And I think the biggest thing is attention to detail, putting the new power board or good power board back into the unit at the end of the day. And what a lot of the students are forgetting to do or ignoring is putting the screws back in the correct way.
Well, hold on a minute. Let's back up a step. Let's talk about first, for those who haven't heard previous podcasts, what does a power board do? What's the
All right,
purpose
let's
of a
start from the
power board?
basics then. Let's
All
talk
right,
about
we'll start from the beginning, right? So what does a power board do?
So we're basically converting AC to DC on the power board.
It's our inverter.
And let's back up a second too and talk about, is this happening on multiple boards? Is it happening on one board? It depends on the system.
Correct. It can be a 2-board or 1-board, or it could be a 3-board.
It
Right?
could be a 3-board.
Because it goes through a noise filter. We go through then our inverter board, power board, and then we can have a cat board. It just depends on
But
what it is.
regardless of how many boards there are, the process is
It's the same. Yes.
We'll take the incoming power, we're going to convert AC to DC, and we're going to provide a 3-phase simulated power to the compressor.
Compressor, yeah. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, so that section could be happening depending on what board it is, how many boards it is. It always has a power board section to that.
Correct.
To that system.
Right. And the AC power, if it's 208, 230 coming in, we're going to get around 300 volts DC
Correct.
coming out.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, and that's where our IGBTs are located. And that's our insulated gate bipolar transistors.
Yeah.
All right. And then just think of those as just switches.
There's switches that open, close, depending on the demand of the system.
Right. And there's usually 6 of them, and they're embedded into a chip.
Yeah.
So every time 2 of those switches send voltage to the compressor, it turns the compressor 120 degrees.
Correct.
Another 2 switches send voltage, turn the compressor another 120 degrees.
That's why when you measure AC, right, on UV and W, you have to be careful with that because say you're on a low demand and you're reading, say, remember we want plus or minus 10% of each UV and W. So we're low demand, say you read, 77 volt AC volts between the 3 legs, UV and W. Then all of a sudden their system decides to go up in speed. Now your voltage is going to change of that. So now we're system, more units are coming online, cooling, whatever it's going on. So now your voltage has increased to say 120 volts. So you have to be careful when you're diagnosing that power board, making sure that U and V and W, U to V, U to W is 77 volts. But now your third leg, you measure that, and that's to 120. People are like, oh my, okay, I have a bad power board. I don't have plus or minus 10% between the legs. So making sure that demand doesn't change when you measure that.
You're not catching it in the middle.
That's a good
point. Yeah, because if you catch it in that middle, between the time it takes you to move your leads, it could be at a different speed. So that's actually, I had never thought of that. That's actually not a bad thing.
We're not going to get into every single nook and cranny and detail of the power board. That's for another episode.
There's so much things we can talk about.
What we're going to talk about is what causes a power board to fail and how to replace it.
All right. So what are some of the things that can blow a power board?
Well, the top one, in my opinion, is compressor. Compressor loves to take out boards.
Yeah. So when the compressor shorts, it takes out a board.
Yep.
Right.
And always backfeed into that. So if you have a power board and a noise filter board, I'm going to tell you check the power board and the noise filter board as well. Yeah. Because it could potentially take out both.
Do they typically both go?
Yes.
Okay. So if it's a short,
because it takes out that current limiting resistor on the noise filter.
Right. So if you've got a shorted compressor, before you just order the compressor and come back, let's check those boards.
Correct.
All right. What else can cause a power board to go?
Moisture on the and really this depends on the location of the system. You'd have a system near the ocean. Where you have corrosion.
That's a big one.
But any type of moisture getting into that power board could cause a problem. Voltage, incorrect voltage. This is really something that should be checked on day one when you install the system. What's the voltage coming in? Refer to your model tag for the minimum and maximum voltage allowable on that system. And most of our systems, we're looking at a range of anywhere from 187 volts to 253 volts. But refer to your tag because that can change slightly.
Getting back to that moisture, when I first started with Mitsubishi, one of our service guys went out on a site visit, and there was a unit that was on a boat, a tugboat, and it was used, to cool, I don't know what they call it, where the bridge, I guess, there's a wheelhouse or whatever it's called, right? And he was sitting out there, and somebody comes along and says, "Did they tell you that this boat took a 36-foot wave, and this unit was underwater?" So nice. They're not designed. None of our equipment is designed to work underwater. Okay,
that's funny.
So I just make that clear.
Yeah, that's a good point. So lightning strikes, stuff like that could be devastating to electronics, right? Yeah. Static electricity could be devastating. Yeah. Just you got a big sweater on one day and you're servicing a unit and you send some static into a control, just a regular control board. You could take that control board out.
Yeah, this is the same thing. Like especially here in the winter, when you go to gas up, you should really ground yourself before you touch the fuel pump. If you're going to be touching a piece of equipment with electronics in it, ground yourself because that static electricity will fry a board. This is why the electronics folks are on these rubber mats and they ground themselves so they don't create that static electricity because It sounds like a little thing. I just use it to torture the cat and the dog, but it can actually fry a board.
You got to be careful, too, with high voltage coming in, right? Because to say if you're a startup during the day, you measure roughly 250 volts. That might be okay because we're within that range. But what happens to the grid around 2, 3, 4 a.m. in the morning? Yeah. It rises, right? Yeah. And that could potentially where you can blow out the board. And typically when that happens, you're blowing out the power board because when we convert from AC to DC, our range is not because of AC to voltage. It's more because we have a max on what we can do with DC voltage. That's what really pops.
So voltage spikes, what about brownouts?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Because the voltage has to be between, it's 208, 230 plus or minus 10%. So the incoming voltage really, it should be a minimum of 187 volts. And that's a very minimum.
Correct.
And 253 is going to be the high end.
highest, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're on a job site and you got multiple pieces of equipment and you start losing electronics on that equipment, stop. Grab your multimeter, check incoming voltage.
Yeah.
Before you do anything, before you start condemning any parts, condemning any equipment, check your voltage coming in. That's a huge part.
There's a
of the
reason why
troubleshooting.
it's failing.
Yeah.
So it's determine what it is.
Yeah, and what I tell my students all the time is don't rush to judgment as well. If you diagnose a bad power board, don't stop there and order a new power board. Check other components that may have taken out.
Yeah, something's taking out that board. We got to know why.
Ohm out your compressor. Check other components in the system, so that you're not coming back with a new power board. Pop that in, and
then pops.
Yeah, and that power board malfunctions, right?
Yep.
So we got what about rodents and reptiles?
Yeah, that's always a problem.
I mean, up here in the Northeast, we got rodents, but Scott, you
Frogs. Never heard this before. Frogs
yeah.
gets in our units in the South, in Georgia.
I saw a condensing unit one time. They have little holes in the bottom about the size of a pencil.
Yeah.
And I went to clean it out, I think, or do something, or condenser film. I forget, but I ended up taking the top off. And I saw a dead snake with a dead frog in its belly. So they both got in there. The snake got in through this little hole, ate the frog, and couldn't get back out. So they both died. That was pretty cool. But I digress. No, but mice, and then down in the Southwest, they have crazy ants. Have you heard of those?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Right? Little ants that actually love to eat electronics.
They love They love the heat in that. So that's what they're going after.
They'll eat power boards. They'll eat printed circuit boards. It's crazy.
I know.
And snakes. I've seen snakes.
Stink bugs.
Yeah, mice. Mice are the most common ones that I've seen up here. You can walk up to a unit and smell the mice, and without even
something
opening
happens.
It up, it's mice.
Yeah, wild boars are a problem. No, I'm just kidding. All right.
Pterodactyls, they're a problem.
Anyway, we've gone through what could take out a power board, right? But what are we looking at on the IGBTs? What do they look like? They look like a large microchip with a bunch of pins coming out the side, and we call them spiders.
Spiders, yeah.
Right? And they protrude off the back of the power board. Now, most of the time on smaller residential units like the M series, there's an aluminum heat sink attached to it, so we're really not seeing the chips, right? And there's heat paste between the chips and that heat sink, and we're relying on the condenser fan motor to draw air across that heat sink. That's what cools our IGBTs. There's also a thermistor that is screwed in right behind the IGBTs to sense the temperature of those IGBTs to make sure if they overheat, it'll shut the system down on an error before that power board fails. Unfortunately, sometimes the power boards get way too hot before we can throw an error, and you know what happens after that.
Right.
Right.
So let's talk about the M series. As far as I recall, most M series units, you're dealing with one board.
It's going to be a one board system. Now, when you go into the MXZ Smart Multi, that's when you have multiple
other than the
boards.
Smart Multi, I can't think of
the
an
MUZs and MUIs.
One board.
Yeah, they're typically one board, correct.
And if you order a board, if you have to replace that board and you order a new board, it's going to come with what?
Well, for one, it actually gives you instructions, right, about the board. So the M series board, you will not get, as Steve just mentioned, right, with the heat paste, right? It's already embedded. It's already applied, so you don't need that for the heat paste with that. But now going into our other models like P series, where we have typically a 2 to 3 board systems, where we're going to have to. The heat paste comes when you order. Say we have a bad power board.
Yeah,
right?
it comes right in the box.
It comes right in the box, and there's a sheet of paper. It comes with. Basically, it tells you where to apply that heat paste.
Let's talk about the heat paste for a second. What is the purpose? Why do we need heat paste? I know. I'm asking an obvious question, but let's just make it clear for those who don't know.
Yeah, it's a thermal conductor, so it's going to allow that heat from that chip to be transferred to
Pass
the
through.
heatsink.
Right.
Yeah.
Much better than just sitting up against it.
Right. On one side of the board, you might have these fins, and that's so the airflow and gets some surface
through,
area, and that cools it off. The other side of the board is going to have that heat sink, and that heat sink is going to mount to a piece of metal on the equipment.
Yep.
Right. If we just put that metal to metal, it's not going to transfer the heat as efficiently. That heat paste acts like as a conductor for that heat to go from the fins to the heat sink to the metal and dissipate that way. So that heat paste is very important. Otherwise, if you don't put that heat paste on, or if it doesn't come with heat paste, that board that you put in will not last.
No, it will not.
So best practice with heat paste, and is actually a really cool YouTube video on heat paste and how to apply it to electronics.
Okay.
You should be wiping off the old
heat
heat paste that's on the left on the unit.
Yep.
Clean that all up and apply a layer of heat paste to the new chip. Make sure that you're not putting too much.
All right.
You want to get that stuff everywhere, right? You get on your fingers, it gets in
it's
your car
nasty
seat,
stuff,
you
too.
bring it home, it's on your pants.
It's nasty.
Right? It's almost like never sees. You get a little bit on you and it's
It's
everywhere.
never,
Yeah.
Right.
It
But
sticks to everything.
so the next important thing, we got the heat paste on there, and then we have anywhere from 4 to 6 screws.
This is a very underrated topic we're about to discuss.
Yeah, and I was talking about it at the beginning until I was rudely interrupted by Paul.
Yeah, we had to start all over. Thanks.
So anyway, chili.
So anyway, you got 4 to 6 screws that need to hold this power board up against the heat sink. And they're a torque. Here we go again with torque, right? No, everybody just likes to hand torque things, right? And then just either tighten it until they strip the screw or not tighten it enough. Right? And that's the big one that we're seeing in the field is contractors are not tightening the screws enough.
And that goes back to the heat sink making contact, the nice solid contact. If you don't tighten it enough, you get that gap in there. It's not dissipating the heat.
So, but let's talk about how we're tightening it with the torque, but making sure we're not doing it all at once. Tighten that screw.
Yeah. So how do we tighten down a tire on our car or a head gasket?
Yeah.
You don't just sock down that first
About halfway in every one, and then kind of work your way in from there.
Yeah, you like a star pattern. You go around and you put those screws in about a third of the way, and then finish them off to whatever torque spec for that particular unit. How do we find that? Service manual of the particular model you're working on. mylinkdrive.com. That's where you want to go. Pick the outdoor unit you're working on. Pick the manual. It's going to be in the service manual. How to diagnose power boards, how to install the power board, right? And also the instructions that come in the box for the part you're replacing.
Yeah.
So we give you a tube of heat paste, but there's also a piece of paper in there. Don't throw that all out.
Because there's
Throw it in the back of
information
your
on there.
service van and then say, well, what's this tube after you replaced it?
The tube depends on the board you're replacing because, as I think, Scott, you just said, the M-Series board comes with a paste already applied.
Correct.
So there's no tube.
Yep.
But if you get a P-Series, right, you can now have multiple boards. You can have one board or multiple boards.
Correct.
Right? So if you've got the 12,000 or 18,000 BTU unit, it's a single board.
For P-Series.
For P-Series, right? And that heat sink, that paste is already applied to the heat sink, right?
Right.
But what happens if I get a 24,000 BTU or above P-Series unit?
Well, it just depends on what generation, right? So our current generation, we are in the 7th generation for outdoor units. So that case, like a 24 model, you're looking at 2 boards.
Right.
Yeah.
Control board and our power board.
Previous generation, we were looking at three different boards.
Right.
But that power board is what we're
That's what we're
concentrating
focusing on this
Right.
discussion.
But that power board now, the paste does not come applied. That's the tube Steve was talking about.
so remember,
there'll be a tube in a plastic bag with the instructions.
Correct.
And you're not going to find it in the manual, the instructions for the heat paste. That's why we're having this podcast here.
Right.
Because if you see a tube, you can't just ignore it.
Yeah.
We're
not giving you something not to use. It's there for a reason.
It's there for a reason. So again, just to reiterate, best practice is wipe off any old paste that's on there, apply this paste that comes with the tube to the heat sink, put the board in. Don't just tighten down that first screw. The first screw goes in a third of the way. Then you go to the second screw, goes a third of the way, and the
so
third
forth.
screw, and so on. So just like the star pattern on a, you skip on a lug nut when you're replacing a
Exactly.
tire.
But be careful with the screws, right? I mean, they are tiny, right?
Yeah.
Magnetic screwdriver.
Yeah, magnetic. And you can lose one, guys. If you lose one, you find that screw.
Now that happens.
I've learned this the hard way in many classes. So what Steve was mentioning earlier when we first started, I was chuckling about the power board. So I was actually here in Boston teaching your advanced M&P class, and during that class we change out a bad power board in one of the units. And so all the groups went through. So the last group, they installed the power board and everything whatnot. So I always tell the class, okay, make sure all the screws are in, paste and everything else, turn on the unit, make sure everything works. And I was preoccupied on another group because I was helping another group on their troubleshooting scenario. And so they turned on the power, everything worked. About a week later, Steve? Or something like that?
Yeah.
I get a phone call from Steve, and he goes, did you replace the power board in your class? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, yeah, it just popped. Yeah, and it sounded like a large what, explosion, whatever it sounded like.
Yeah, it sounds like a gunshot.
Gunshot, yeah. And what it was is we were missing a screw. And where was the screw?
It was on the spider connection.
It was on the spider connection on the back, and it blew the board.
Yeah. So here's the thing: a screw, obviously, it's metal, it's conductive.
Yeah.
If you drop a screw, you can't just ignore it and say,
So it's
"Oh
like,
well,
it's okay.
yeah,
I got three
right."
others. It's holding.
You're gonna have to go through the work of taking that board back out and
try to
opening
find
up.
it.
And no, you have to find it.
Yes.
It's not trying to find it because you're charging a customer for a service call. You're replacing a part. All right. If you leave and that fries again, guess what? You're not going to charge for that second one. You're going to be eating that. So do yourself a favor. You drop a screw in there, find it, and get it. Because it could, it took a week for it to fry something. It's not like the equipment wasn't being used. The screw just had to sit in the right place
In the right time,
vibrations
everything.
and everything
Yep.
else.
Yeah.
So please find that screw.
I'm not going to sit here and say that, my chair just fell apart. I got to stop eating chili.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're sitting here thinking, explaining this like it's really easy to replace a power board.
No, it's not. It's
difficult. It's the board is sitting in the far back inside the P series unit, and you got to get your hands in there and put the circuit board in and get it into the clips that they sit in, the little plastic.
Oh, those are fun.
Clips, right? Getting it out is a pain in the butt. You got to use some needle nose, squeeze the clip down, and try and get all four clips to open up and pull that board out.
Yeah.
It's not an easy task.
No.
Okay, but with the right tools, magnetic screwdriver to get them started, right, and make sure all your screws are in and they're not falling behind the power board, because they will fall behind there, and if they do, guess what?
You will pop a board.
Start over and pull that board back out. Locate your screw. If you're missing a screw, well, I got 5 out of 6 screws. That should be good.
No.
This is where we're having boards malfunction
because remember,
prematurely.
that heat sink's got a hit on the back of the side.
Nice connection.
So if there's that connection's not satisfied, you can potentially lose that and pop it.
Yeah.
So
So
definitely.
do it right. Do it right the first time, and you're not going to have any trouble.
Yeah. Now let's move on to City Multi, right? IGBTs, they work the same way on a City Multi, but we're looking at a larger module.
and different locations.
Yes. So depending on the generation of City Multi system you're working on, it could be air cooled, like our M&P series, where we're using the condenser fan motors to cool
Correct.
the IPM module. On our new engines, we're actually using a refrigerant loop through the back of the heat sink for the IPM to cool that IPM module down. Rules still apply. Make sure you torque your screws to torque specs. Where do I find those? Service manual for the outdoor unit, mylinkdrive.com. Make sure your screws are put in. All the screws are put in. Your heat paste is put on correctly. Again, best practice, clean off any residual or old heat paste that may be on there and start fresh with a nice layer of heat paste, not too much.
Yeah.
Right.
And remember in City Multi with InGen, you're doing the power board, right? And then depending on how many outdoor fan motors they have, because remember a fan board also has the heat sink as well.
So let me ask you something. You're replacing a board. Are you using the whole tube of heat paste on that board?
No.
No, just enough to coat it?
Just enough.
To coat
Remember,
that heat
we
sink.
mentioned several times we do not overcoat it.
Yeah. So just enough to coat that heat sink. And then again, the screws are key, because I want people to understand. You just leave one screw out. Forget it if you drop it. If you drop it on the ground and you can't find it, you leave that one screw out. that is not making a nice tight connection between that heat sink and the metal that it's attached to. And that's where the heat dissipates. So that's why we're harping on this so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're looking at metric screws too, right? So they're
good
not
point.
an easy screw to find, but you can match something up. We'd recommend do not lose the screws that come with it. You know, we're looking at M3 through M8 as far as metric screw size for our units. And you'll see a chart in the manual with the torque spec for that particular screw.
As Steve mentioned several times, magnetic screwdriver will be your best friend.
Yeah, I've had magnetic screwdrivers and magnetic nut drivers because you have to, because there are some things you just can't get. How are you going to hold the screw in there if it's in there? So they are your friend. They're nice to have.
It's not a bad idea to have a magnetic tray that you can bring with you to the unit. You can throw all your screws on the magnetic tray. You can throw your screwdriver on the magnetic tray.
Yeah.
Magnetize your screwdriver if it's not magnetized, right? So we talked about the operation of the power board. We talked about different style units and what to expect with our heat sinks, right? Again, we've kind of put M series in a bucket and said they're all one board systems. We really shouldn't say that. Always double check and
you're
make
always
sure
gonna triple check, right?
that that box with that replacement board has heat paste in it, right? Refer to your service manual for any instructions on how to diagnose it,
Yep.
right?
And you better, just like with M series, we have our SUZ line, right?
Yeah.
So some of those are the lower BTU models are going to be a one board system, but as we get into a certain BTU and up, I don't remember on the top of my head. That's when you go into a multiple board system.
Yeah. So it
Just
basically
depends.
with P series, 12 to 18,000 one board, 24,000 and above multiple boards.
Yeah.
And heat paste is coming with it.
And it depends on the generation.
Right. And regardless of the generation, regardless of the piece of equipment, if there's a board, this is, I think, the most important thing about the whole topic, regardless of the equipment. If there's a board with a heat sink on it, it needs paste.
Yes.
It needs that heat paste. It's a silicone-based paste that just it's conductive, and it's going to just dissipate the heat. Because if those boards overheat, that'll definitely fry the board, and you'll be back there again. So please just be aware of that.
And it comes with the part when you order it.
Right.
With the board, yeah.
Right. You know, and I used to, and you know what? Save the tube you don't use, save it in your truck because it may save you sometimes. I used to because when I was doing this, and if I didn't use the whole tube, I wouldn't just throw it away. I'd keep it in the truck because sometimes you'll come across one and you need more. So you never know, but don't just throw it away. Save
So
it.
I want to talk about two quick things before we end this episode, and that is taking. This is great. You know, the technology we have nowadays, having a smartphone in your pocket with a camera. Take a photo of the power board and the connections to the power board before you remove it, right?
Smart. Yeah.
Because you could put that new power board in, and I've seen it happen here in class where they'll pinch a thermistor or something behind the board, and they forgot to connect it. Now they got an error code, and they're even more confused than when they started. So make sure that you check your connections after you put the new board in. Double check your connections. Take a look at the photo you took of what the board looked like
before you do anything. Yep.
Yeah, and then any boards with dip switches on them, right? You're gonna have to set dip switches model and capacity, and power boards on residential and most likely not going to have dip switches on them. But if you're changing a control board, check your dip switches and match them up to the old system. And if you're unsure of what the dip switch should be set for, go to mylinkdrive.com to the service manual, look up your factory settings, make sure the dip switches are set for the model of that unit. And any other settings on those dip switches are set correctly.
And you can also find that on the panel of the unit as well.
Right.
For the model capacity.
And that's because a board may be a board used for multiple units,
Correct.
multiple sizes.
Yeah.
So the one that you're putting in, make sure that the dip switches are set the same way the one that you're taking out, assuming everything worked normally and worked right, because when in doubt, go to the manual, or as you said, the panel, it's on there.
And going back to your point, Steve, about making sure all the connectors are in the right spot. Look, we color coordinate our connectors, right? So if you have a red connector and it's plugged into a orange in our power board connector, right there, that should be alarming to you.
Yeah, because some of our connectors are the same type of connector.
Yes.
But they're just colored differently. So
Yes.
make sure the colors match.
Match up. Yeah.
Right. And again, if you're unsure, we have test point diagrams in the manual, schematics, and everything you can follow in there.
But you said the easiest thing
Take a picture.
is most people have a phone with a camera on it. If you have a phone and it doesn't have a camera, if you don't have a phone, page somebody who does.
Right.
You know, send a signal on their beeper.
When I change out boards for the class, I probably have over 100 pictures on my phone of all of my boards because I take pictures of it. Okay, this is what I need to do, and then
right, and make sure, I think, not pinching wires, the right amount of screws, tighten down the right way, tighten down to the right torque, the heat paste, matching the dip switches if there are any. You know, I think those are all good practices, and it's going to save you a lot of grief. Yeah, potentially save you a lot of grief.
Yeah, it was one thing that we didn't mention that actually a student brought up to me, and I say this all the time. I learn from my students in class. Right. We don't know everything.
No.
We could go up in front of class and say, I've been doing this for 40 years. That doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything.
I learn every day, and I learn a lot from my students. And
the best part about teaching.
One student that was telling me they kept losing power boards on this unit. And I said, well, right away, I said, check the voltage. Oh, no, it wasn't nothing to do with voltage. Dirty condenser coil.
Really?
And that kind of blew my mind. I was like, it makes sense. So think about it. If we're using the condenser fan motor to cool the heatsink, and my condenser coil is plugged, and I'm not at the point where I'm really not tripping the pressure switch yet.
Airflow
across that heatsink.
Oh, it'll just heat up. And it just rapidly increases over before you do the air code.
And we do have a heatsink thermistor. But after a while, that power board's going to give way. And that was the case he was having with that one unit. So wash your coils, water only. Wash them before you need any type of cleaner on our units. If you use cleaner on our units, you're going to destroy our coils, right? Yeah. Rinse with water, wash those coils down. Make sure you do your maintenance to our systems. That's going to help big time.
Yeah, a lot of those cleaners that people are using are acidic, and they eat away.
They eat up.
And if you don't do a good job of really getting rid of that, it can do more harm than good. So just be careful with those things.
Yeah. So use your heat paste, torque your screws, eat your chili. That's it for this episode.
Don't lose your screws. Don't have extra screws. If you got a screw loose, you're probably enjoying the show.
Yeah. And eat chili with no beans.
No.
Yeah.
Gotta have beans, man.
No.
He probably thinks mayonnaise is spicy. I don't know.
Oh, mayonnaise is delicious. Just give me a spoon of mayonnaise. Yeah.
All right. I know I love my chili. Like I said, at Cincinnati, I'm sorry. I shouldn't badmouth Cincinnati, but it's not the place.
Have you had what's the not Gold Star or other big place out there?
It's a big chain. It's disgusting. Huh. There's no flavor in it. There's no flavor. They call it chili. They pride themselves on chili.
I eat random foods. I do, but I just can't get on board with chili on spaghetti.
No, I don't mind that part. But if you're gonna brag about how good your chili is, make it have flavor. Right? That's my only thing out there. Now, next time I go to Cincinnati, somebody's gonna probably put a hit out on me. But
it's all right. Don't forget your Fritos scoops as well. So when you got your chili and your red onions and your sour cream and cheese,
get your Fritos. Yeah,
you get those big bag of Fritos scoops.
Yeah. I make a with the Frito scoops. I make these a tamale dip that I chop them up, and then Velveeta cheese, spicy, and then the tamales, the juice that comes in, and a couple other ingredients, and then I put it in, melt it, and then use the Dorito scoop chips. So you have to have the scoop chips. They come out delicious.
Did you ever notice that your dog's feet smell like Fritos?
Dog feet smell like what?
I don't smell my dog's feet.
Yeah, so you smell your dog's feet?
Sure.
Hopefully that's all you smell. Hopefully it's only his feet you're smelling.
Yeah, it is. Ladies, listen, dogs would smell. Listen, if you have a dog, smell your dog's feet. They smell just like Fritos.
Wonderful.
I'm telling you.
You ever smell the back of a power board?
Smells like Fritos.
It smells like salt and vinegar chips. All right, we'll see you guys on the next one.
I'll see you.